everybody, welcome to the County Seat today. I'm your host, Chad Booth. Every now and then, a drama in real life takes place that nobody really knows about. It's got intrigue, it's got mystery, it's got a lot of problems, it's got challenges, it's got heroes, it's got villains. And one of those has actually taken place, but you probably missed most of it if you're like most Utahns. Today on our program, we are going to go behind the scenes of the transition from Miller Motorsports Park to the Utah Motorsports Campus and what things took place to save one of Utah's great treasures. Let's start by recapping what the press and the public know.
And I know that's like a dad talking about his kids, but it's a world-class track. And we'll have automobile and motorcycle racing of most all types.
The Miller Motorsports Park opened for business in April of 2006, created by the passion that Larry H. Miller had for cars and a vision of sharing that passion with all kinds of people. The 512-acre facility is a one-of-a-kind project here in the United States and was built on land that Tooele County subleased to the Miller Motorsports Park under a 10-year lease, with the intent that the county would sell the land to the Millers after completing a land swap with the Soil Conservation District. From 2006 till around 2015, the Miller Motorsports Park became a facet of the community, impacting additional businesses that built up around the track. Larry Miller passed away in 2009. With his passing, there was a change in leadership in the Miller companies. The county commission also changed during that time. On May 8, 2015, Tooele County sat down with the Millers to discuss what they thought would be the sale of the land, but were instead informed that the lease would not be renewed. The Miller Group was going in a different direction, but the complex would be gifted to the county. This left the Tooele County Commission with a unique policy question of whether to keep or sell the land. This is where things get interesting in a truly one-of-a-kind situation, where the county owned the ground and the facility, but they didn't have the book of business that would have told a new owner where money was made, lost, or any information of the Millers' previous operations, which set the stage for a difficult transition because there was more to consider than your typical real estate transaction, due to the fact that the piece of property and its future would have an impact on the entire community. For the county seat, I'm Derek Dowsett.
Thanks, Derek, for that report. We will continue with the county seat. We will be joined by Commissioner Sean Milne, who sat right in the middle of this entire story, and he'll tell you the things that up until now haven't been known or understood. We'll be right back with the county seat.
Utah has a national treasure where winding canyons stretch to the horizon, where nature forms elegant structures, and where iconic monuments of the West stand tall. Visitors around the world come to get a glimpse of southern Utah's legendary landscape and landmarks. Join them and explore San Juan County, Utah's Canyon Country.
In a place that is beyond words, there is nothing to be said, except take your time in Bryce Canyon Country.
There are meetings, and then there are gatherings. At the Davis Conference Center, we know the difference. Turn your event into something more than just another business summit. With over 70,000 square feet of flexible meeting space, state-of-the-art presentation amenities, and inspiring architecture, the Davis Conference Center is designed to deliver stellar results in a majestic setting. Take your convention to the next level. Schedule now at davisconferencecenter.com.
Yeah, we're folks bound by traditions. Whether it's holiday time or vacation time, make sure that one of your traditions is a stop at the Creamery in Beaver, Utah. Delicious cheese direct from the factory, ice cream, tasty treats, crafts, and gifts of all kinds. and it's the perfect place to get a bowl of creamy mac and cheese. Start your new tradition the next time you're headed our way. The Creamery in Beaver, Utah. Farm, meet table.
Welcome back to the county seat. We are at the the Utah Motorsports Campus in Tooele County. Joining us for a conversation today about the things that happened behind the scene in the sale of the campus and how the county ended up with us, Commissioner Sean Mill. Thanks
Hello.
for joining us today, Sean.
Thanks for having me.
You look very sporty in your race shirt.
Thank you very much. Yeah, a little piece of collateral picked up over the last few years.
Yes, I've a lot of proud logos on that. I'm jealous.
But it's one of those merit badges that you get from going through the situation, I guess.
I suppose so. So, what do you think is the one thing that most people don't understand about what really happened out here? We know that we know that Miller's didn't want the track anymore, and they just said, "Here, you take it." Geez, that would have seemed like, gosh, whippy.
Yeah, it would be, I guess, except for the fact that, you know, Tooele County, like most, wouldn't have any idea on how to run such a unique kind of business, right? There's a lot of tension, even in counties here in Utah, between publicly owned golf courses and whether or not they're really returning on their investment. You know, you've got some public entities that have these very nice amenities. They add to a quality of life. They may even draw people from outside the jurisdiction, and they spend money. And there's a lot of concentration on high discretionary net worth individuals. So, you know, having come from a city council position before coming to Tooele County, I know about one of those municipal run, you know, city golf courses, and they can be challenging. Well, this is that much more so. One of the things that folks ask most often is, how did the county end up with it? And really it comes down to the county owned the land. And at the very beginning, if we go back, you know, 13, 14 years now, Tooele County was leasing this land that the racetrack sits on top of. And they had worked that out with another entity that for legal reasons couldn't overtly just sell the land. And so the transaction to become the owners of this land took a number of years. And Larry had this passion, as we all know, fantastic man, the legend. I mean, just he's fantastic. Look at all the great things that he and his family and foundations have done in our great state. And he wanted a place like this for him to originally, I'm told, come out with some friends and be able to race at speed in a safe environment, closed course. And then that idea grew into a public venue, you know, a place where you and I could come pay a ticket and see some awesome events that would be certainly unique to Utah. Well, he entered negotiations with my predecessors many years ago and said, you know, I'd like to build this. And oversimplifying that negotiation, the county said, well, we can sublease to you. So then Miller Motorsports Park was born. And the family and Larry went about creating this awesome facility and everything that it's done. And over the next few years, the county got that transition taken care of so that they were now the owners. So the transaction now being done, they were owners of the land. But the capital improvements like this wonderful building that we're sitting inside of, this belonged to Larry and his family, right? The companies. As did the asphalt out there that the cars drive on, the grandstands and everything else. So we skip forward to May 8th of 2015, a day I will remember very well. And we've got new county commissioners in. Gail Miller has identified that the Miller companies are going to be run by a board of directors. It's going to be kind of taken outside of the family, you know, operations. And county commissioners are thinking, you know what, we're about to have a meeting to talk about the future of working together with Miller ownership of this facility. A 10-year lease was on the horizon, and by that original lease agreement, it would auto-renew. And so we thought that's just the way that would be, and we would love to continue having them in our community. We didn't want to own it, right? That wasn't even that was the furthest thing from our mind. We really didn't think that was going to be the case. And we learned that they had a different course that they were setting for the company. And they said, well, because you guys own the land and because of our interests, you know, we're gonna deed this to you. And we'll finish out this season as management, and we'll move forward. And I got to tell you, that was a really humbling day. I remember myself and the two previous commissioners were thinking, well, gosh, we don't know the first thing about a racetrack, but here we are, we've been gifted one. And it's a gift with some strings attached, right? Because we don't know what we don't know. And now we have this task, this responsibility of making sure that 10 years worth of influence to our local economy isn't immediately lost, that it doesn't just shutter up because we don't know what we're doing. And so we went about advertising as widely as everybody would be able to know who is passionate about the facility, who is aware of the events because they've either come out here or they pay attention to motorsports. And we're like, well, between our hoteliers, our retailers, the dining establishments, just the overall local economy, we've got to keep that effect going through our community. And so we set about from that point, the green flag waved, and we're like, okay, game on, let's get this going, and let's find out what we need to know. Let's talk with the stakeholders and find out what they can share with us, and chart a course. And let's get through this course to the finish line.
So in the process of doing this, the decision was, well, we need to sell the facility, but what was weighing on your mind is how you sell it to make sure that you, I mean, what was in that first sale, what was the thing that you were most trying to do? Because there, I mean, you could just sell the real estate and you would have had, you'd have had a windfall, even though you would have lost the facility. So what kind of criteria were you trying to look at when you were making that original decision?
Excellent questions, and you kind of allude to the fact that the first sale, right? There was a first sale that was voided. There was a second sale that was successful. Well, the second sale even went to court. We were able to settle out of court to get things moving along, honestly, to just get things done. Unfortunately, you know, that's a whole story in and of itself, and we were able to get the second sale, the final sale, taken care of from some lessons learned with the first. So you allude to that, and what were some of the things that we were thinking? Well, I can tell you that right up front, we wanted to have as little disruption to the economy as possible, as little disruption to the stakeholders, to the community members. You know, we wanted this to be as smooth as we possibly could get it, knowing that there were going to be some bumps in the road because it was a learning curve for everybody, right? So we set about trying to figure out, should we lease it and hold on to the land? We figured that there was too much risk where, you know, it's been widely reported, and you know, being sensitive to the details, but the facility, part of the reason why it was being gifted to us is it just wasn't making financial sense for the previous owners. And so we were sensitive to that. If golf courses, municipal golf courses lose money, again, this was on several magnitude, you know, greater than that. And we wanted to make sure that being as stewards of tax dollars, we couldn't absorb that kind of a loss, right? So we thought, well, leasing would still hold us accountable for some losses, and it'd be very vulnerable. So we identified we're going to sell it. So now what do you do to qualify who to sell it, how to go about it? And we wanted to look at the validity of the buyer. We wanted to look at the long-term economic impact to the community and the viability, like that long-term part. It's also who has the cash holdings to be able to make this happen, and to be able to afford a couple of years of a turnaround game to get it in a new direction. And is that use in the long term consistent with land use and general planning that we have for the facility, the surroundings, you know, the community around it? Folks can tell you that even a few miles away, they can hear I think it's fantastic now, but I remember when I first heard it, it was like, wow, that sounds like a bee swarm just a couple of houses away. You know, and if you live closer than I do, which is several miles away, that can be very loud on a spring day like today's weather is, and you open the windows to kind of freshen the air, and it can be pretty loud and pretty deafening. If you love that, fantastic. But sometimes there might be some residential type uses. You want to be sensitive. And so just selling it to anybody for the real estate was something we were sensitive to, and we looked past it for a bigger picture.
So in essence, you ended up with the first sale, taking that into consideration, protecting the jobs, protecting the icon itself, and took the lesser of the two bids, thinking that in the long run, it would be more financially beneficial to the county.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, well, this is a very good place for us to break. When we come back, we're going to find out what went on behind the scenes when that happened. We'll be right back with County Seat.
all the traveling that I've done over the world, I'd still rate this locale as being one of the best.
This is some of the most scenic country out there. And part of the appeal for Kanab is it's a small town. It's beautiful. People are very friendly.
It's just been awe-inspiring.
You just couldn't find a nicer place to come.
In our world, the sun shines on high adventure, and new experiences are yours for the taking. And everything in you looking to play outside the box. Cedar City, it's time to play.
Welcome back to the county seat, talking to Commissioner Sean Milne, who is in the middle of the entire transfer of Miller Motorsports Park to become the Utah Motorsports Campus. So just to recap, you put this out in bid, you took a lot of things into consideration. The county decided they were going to look at the long game was what most beneficial in the long run, and you took the slightly smaller cash bid. What happened?
Yeah, so we had a number of entities that were interested in the facility, and we really had two at the top. And when it came down to it, by the close of the deadline in negotiations, we had a difference of $2.5 million, 22.5 versus 20 for the purchase of the facility. And it was a unanimous decision between the county commission and our team of advisors that said you need to go with the 20 million. And the reason why is, as you described, the long game, right? $2.5 million to an organization of our size is a big deal, but it also isn't the end all be all. Remember, our intentions was to sell this to somebody that would be able to invest in it in a way that would make it last for a long time. We have a local economy built around the seasonality of these visitors and tourists that come to the facility. If somebody had to go at it and say in a year they just couldn't make it happen and we were right back where we started, that wouldn't help our community. So when we were looking at these two potential owners, there were several things that made it just a hands down that we should go with the one that had offered 20. Now, we are political creatures. We knew the sensitivity to the $2.5 million seemingly being left on the table, but with an analysis that we had done, we knew that the 20 was the long term. They were going to immediately put millions of dollars over the next couple of years into capital facility improvements, some deferred maintenance, meaning some maintenance that had not been done by previous owners, and honestly, it kind of widened that gap further when the county owned it. So we identified who we wanted to sell it to. The losing party decided to sue. And sadly, a judge said, yes, you need to take the highest net, cash in hand right now offer. That was hugely disappointing for us. We said, but we don't believe that the long-term plans that they've identified in their proposal would be consistent with long-term use of the facility. It would actually hamper it in our views and that of our advisors. So having learned the lessons that we did, there was an immediate need, first and foremost, because now we're into what would typically be planning for that next year's season. So we needed to have someone who could step in, because again, we don't have an internal department that takes over a world-class racing facility like this. And so we had a program where the party we had already been working with was already planning on how they could make that season work. And we said, all right, so we need to time out for just a minute. We need to have a marketing and management plan as a stopgap until we can learn the lessons we did from the lawsuit and then put it back up for sale.
So it was the party that lost the bid that actually said, well, we'll manage it while you figure this out.
Right, so we had some pretty heavy negotiations on what that would look like. Obviously, we wanted to minimize the amount of risk our local taxpayers would have and still have the economic benefit, preserving jobs here on site.
So in essence, they lost the bid, the bid got thrown out in court. You wanted to sell it to them, and they said, okay, we're the losers. I mean, I'd be pretty ticked. And yet they said they would still come in and manage it and be willing to Were they looking at bidding on it again?
Oh, absolutely. At that time, you know, they said that they were still very much interested, and we were hopeful that even as disappointing as that situation was through the courts, that there'd be other interested parties as well. I mean, yes, we knew months prior to the sale being voided that out of the chosen folks, the folks that chose to come forward and say, hey, we would like to buy this, that they were the one. And yes, there was a lot of disappointment in the way that that verdict was read. It's totally at odds with practical application of the same law by municipalities and governmental entities for decades. Case in point, I mean, the way that state law got modified as a result of that lawsuit by the state legislature, overwhelmingly in support of modifying the law to be written in a way that would then be consistent with how it had already been applied for decades. So the county still, of course, maintains that the judge interpreted this incorrectly. That's his professional, you know, place to do that.
But the judge, in the meantime, he retires. He's out of the picture.
Correct.
And
recused himself from the next lawsuit with the same party.
Okay. So we're going to have to take a quick break here and come back. But I do want to ask one last question on this. What did you learn about the bidding parties in between that you can share with us? Because there were obviously some revelations that came out.
Yes, there were.
All right, well, we'll pick that up as the place we go to right when we come back here on the county seat.
149 million years in the making, dinosaurs once roamed this land. Now they're found at the Dinosaur National Monument. Let's take you beyond the bones. We call it Dinosaur Land. You'll find it offers adventures and sights not seen anywhere else in the world. Come to Dinosaur Land, Vernal, Utah. You'll want to stay forever. The dinosaurs did.
There's a little place on a Utah map where I was raised, where my heart's at, where the sagebrush grows wild and high, and the stars come out at night. Oh, there ain't nothing like being raised in the basin with a Ute reservation, skiing starvation, that Duchesne County life.
All local products have a story of magical places, real people, and delicious recipes spanning generations. So go ahead and discover flavors you've never tasted and friends you never knew you had. Utah's own Discover Local Food.
Mountains to explore. Adventure to be had. A town to fall in love with. Yes, all that in Park City, Utah. Start your adventure at visitparkcity.com.
Welcome back to the county seat, talking to Commissioner Sean Milne. So we've inherited the racetrack. We don't know anything about how we're going to run it. We don't know anything about how you're supposed to sell it. You put it up for bid. The judge says, slap your hand, no, it didn't work. And now you're in the interim. You've got to sell it again because you got to run this thing or lose the asset. What were the lessons you learned in that interim period to get it to the sale where it's at today?
Well, we learned that there's more than one way to interpret a piece of law, right? Judge interpreted one way, how we interpreted something totally different. We also learned that neither state statute nor county code in Tooele County uniquely had ever conceived being gifted a hugely expensive capital asset like this or the business unit on top. Because one of the things it's very important, but I get asked a lot of questions. And it's clear that folks don't understand. We didn't get the business that came along with the asset. We got the car without knowing how to drive a car. Somebody gifted us a car and said, best of luck. I know you've watched other people drive a car, but you don't know how to drive a car. We had to learn how to drive a car. We had to learn how to manage a very unique asset. We didn't know where revenues came in because this wasn't our business to run. We didn't know where the expenses were before. So working with that marketing and management stopgap solution was really critical for us. We also learned that our original assessment in who to sell it to versus who not to was proved correct with more and more time. The guy that ended up suing us went through 3 attorneys. The first 2, he didn't even have the money to pay them, which was part of our representation to the public on. He's saying that he's got more money to spend on purchasing this asset, but the reality of it is he doesn't have the liquidity. He doesn't have the credibility of the buyer.
So in the discovery process, you found a few interesting facts about the bidder himself and his past history?
We did. You know, I'm going to stop short of saying everything I'd really like to, just to point out how incredibly obvious it was that while it was fantastic in negotiation to have 2 entities who were competing against each other, that worked out well for our taxpayers, right? That worked out well for our negotiations. But the reality of it was he didn't really have the backing he was representing. And if one of the most shocking elements of court is that came out in court even. But what happened over time as it became evidence is he couldn't pay his first attorneys, and they sued him successfully. And he couldn't pay the second one and went on to a third one. Like, there's a reason why we didn't pick that entity. Never mind the fact that even if he had that kind of liquidity, the idea of building high-end homes right up against the asphalt of the track, we didn't think was consistent with long-term viability of this as a tourism kind of draw. After the novelty wears out and you own a $5 million home right up against the track, that noise and that smell of octane and all the public that comes around, we didn't think that was conducive with typical planning and zoning in a way that wouldn't become a bigger annoyance than it was worth.
So quickly, tell me how it resolved. Do we have a happy ending of the
We
story?
have a happy ending. While there are definitely plenty of lessons to be learned, and there are things that Tooele County owns that we shoulda, coulda, woulda done differently, if we knew at the beginning what we know now, that whole transaction would have likely been much smoother, would have been a much easier process. But the good news is the checkered flag has been waved. We've got a sale. It's in new ownership, and the future is looking much more secure as a result.
Unfortunately, we have such limited time within the show. But my question is, if somebody wants to dig into the details of this, is there some way for them to, as Paul Harvey would have said, get the rest of the story?
Yeah. Well, there may or may not be a book in the future, who knows, but there's a lot more to tell, and there's some that, you know, probably just always be left for speculation.
So would it be possible if we were to provide a vehicle for the people to see your presentation that you made to your fellow county commissioners?
Oh, yes.
That we could put that online somewhere?
Absolutely, that would be great.
Excellent. Okay, thank you, Sean, for joining us. Thank you for tuning in. There's a lot more to this story. We will try to get you the information that you need through the county seat and perhaps even with Tooele County. We will look for you next time on the county seat.